Our dad ran our home like a military camp, so at his retirement ceremony, we followed his rules one last time. Growing up in our house didn't feel like childhood. It felt like being assigned to a system that had no off switch. There were no weekends, no relaxed mornings, no lazy afternoons. Time wasn't something we enjoyed, it was something we followed. Every day started at exactly 5 a.m. Not around 5, not a few minutes after. Exactly. We didn't need alarms anymore after a certain point. Our bodies learned before our minds did. You could feel it, this quiet tension that would pull you awake just before the time hit. Like your own instincts were afraid of being late. By 4:58, we were expected to be out of bed. By 5 o'clock, we had to be in the kitchen. Dressed, alert, silent, standing straight, hands by our sides, like inspection could happen at any second. And it always did. Our father would walk in without a word. His eyes would scan everything. Posture, clothes, expressions. He noticed everything. A wrinkled shirt meant carelessness. A yawn meant weakness. Leaning even slightly meant disrespect. And punishment wasn't loud. That's what made it worse. He didn't scream like other parents. He didn't lose control. He stayed completely calm. And somehow, that calm made everything heavier. Drop and give me 50. That was one of his favorites. Push-ups on the cold kitchen floor, first thing in the morning, before your body even felt awake. If your form slipped, the count reset. If you argued, it doubled. If you hesitated, it got worse. Breakfast wasn't guaranteed, it was earned. And even when you earned it, it wasn't warm or comforting. It was quiet, the sound of forks and plates. No talking unless spoken to. No distractions. No second servings unless approved. We learned very early that this wasn't a home where you relaxed. This was a place where you performed. I think the hardest part wasn't the rules. It was the absence of softness. There were no hugs. No, good job. No, how was your day? If we succeeded, it was expected. If we failed, it was corrected. That was the system. And for a long time, we believed it. I was the oldest. That meant I understood things before the others did. Or at least, I thought I did. I told myself this was normal. That this was what strong families look like. That maybe other kids were just weaker. But that belief didn't last forever. Because cracks started showing in moments that shouldn't have mattered. Like the time my sister dropped a glass. She was 7. Her hands were small, still learning how to carry things properly. The glass slipped, hit the floor, and shattered instantly. The sound echoed louder than it should have. She froze. We all did. Not because of the glass. Because of what came next. Our father walked in slowly. He looked at the broken pieces. Then at her. She started apologizing immediately. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Stop. Just one word. Sharp. Controlled. She stopped. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She had already learned that crying didn't help. He crouched down, picked up a piece of glass, then placed it back on the floor. Carelessness is failure. That sentence stayed in that room long after the moment passed. He told her to clean it. Her hands were shaking so badly that she almost cut herself twice. And when she finished, he told her to go outside. No jacket, no shoes. It was cold that day. Not freezing, but cold enough to make you uncomfortable within minutes. She stood there for 2 hours. We watched through the window. Not moving, not speaking. Because we knew, if we interfered, it would get worse. That was the moment something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, permanently. My brother stood next to me, his fists clenched so tight. His knuckles turned white. He didn't say anything, but I could feel it. Something inside him wasn't accepting this anymore. And once that feeling starts, it doesn't go away. Years passed like that. We became efficient, disciplined, controlled. On the outside, we probably looked like the perfect kids. Good grades, good behavior, no complaints. But inside, things were different. We didn't feel close to each other the way siblings usually do. We felt allied, like we were on the same side of something we didn't fully understand yet. We communicated in small looks, short sentences, careful timing, because even conversations felt monitored. School became our escape, not because it was fun, but because it was normal. You'd see kids laughing in hallways, complaining about homework, talking back to teachers and not getting punished like it was a crime. At first, it felt strange. Then it felt unfair. Why did they get that version of life? Why didn't we? I remember going to a friend's house once. It was the first time I saw a family sit together and just talk. No structure, no tension. His mom asked him about his day. His dad laughed at something small. There was noise, movement, comfort. I didn't know how to act. When they offered me food, I waited. My friend looked at me and said, "Just eat. Just eat." No permission, no approval. That moment stayed with me longer than I expected. Because it showed me something I hadn't realized before. Our house wasn't normal, and once you see that, you can't unsee. That night, I didn't sleep properly. Not because of the early wake-up time, but because something had changed in the way I was thinking. Before, everything in our house had felt fixed. Like rules written in stone. You followed them, and that was it. Now, for the first time, I was questioning them. Quietly, carefully, but still, questioning, and that was dangerous. The next morning started like every other. 5 a.m., kitchen, silence, but something felt different between us. My brother didn't look at Dad the same way anymore. Before, his eyes always dropped first. Now, they held just a second longer. It was small, but in our house, small things mattered. Our father noticed everything, and sure enough, he noticed that too. Posture, he said coldly. My brother straightened immediately, but that 1 second delay had already been recorded. Nothing happened right then. That's how it worked. Punishment didn't always come instantly. Sometimes it waited, and that waiting was worse. The day went on like usual. School, classes, silence. But when we came home, we knew. You could feel it in the air. Dinner was quieter than usual. No movement beyond what was necessary. No unnecessary sounds. Then, after we finished eating, he stood up. Stay. One word. We froze. He walked to the center of the room and looked directly at my brother. You hesitated this morning. Not loud, not angry, just precise. My brother didn't respond. Answer. Yes. That was all he said. Yes. Not an excuse. Not a defense. Just acknowledgement. That was new. Before, he would have tried to explain. Now, he didn't. And I think that bothered our father more than anything. Discipline is not optional, Dad said. Then he pointed to the floor. 200. My brother got down and started. 1, 2, 3. His form was perfect, controlled, steady. But around 50, you could see the strain. Around 80, his arms started shaking. At 100, most people would have stopped. But he didn't. Not because he was obeying, but because he was proving something. To himself, to Dad, maybe to all of us. When he reached 150, his arms gave out for a second. He dropped, just for a moment, and in that moment, everything stopped. Because we all knew what came next. Start over. That was the rule, always. My brother stayed on the floor for a few seconds, breathing heavily. Then he pushed himself back up. But this time, something was different. He didn't start counting again. He just stayed there, holding himself up, not moving, not speaking. Dad's voice cut through the silence. Restart. No response. Restart. Still nothing. Then slowly, my brother stood up. Not aggressively, not dramatically, just stood and looked straight at him. No, the word landed harder than anything else in that room ever had. I felt my chest tighten instantly. My sister grabbed the edge of the table. Even the air felt heavier. Dad stepped closer. You don't refuse an order. My brother didn't move. I'm not in your system anymore. That sentence, that was the first real crack. Because it wasn't just defiance. It was clarity. Dad's expression didn't change much. But something behind his eyes did. You live in this house, he said. My brother replied immediately. Not for long. Silence. Long, heavy, uncomfortable silence. Then Dad turned away. Go to your room. No shouting. No escalation. Just control. But this time, it felt different. Because control was slipping. Slowly, but clearly. That night, none of us spoke. Not to Dad. Not even to each other. But again, we didn't need to. We all understood what had just happened. Something had shifted, and there was no going back. Over the next few weeks, things got tighter. Rules became stricter. Schedules became sharper. Every small mistake was corrected. Immediately, it felt like Dad was trying to reinforce something that was already weakening. Like he could feel it slipping. And he didn't know how to stop it. My brother started spending more time outside. At first, it was small things. Extra time after school, long walks, sitting in silence in places where no one was watching him. Then it became more obvious. Late returns, short answers, less engagement, until one evening, he didn't come home on time. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. We sat at the table, waiting. Dad didn't say anything, but his eyes stayed on the clock. Every second was being counted. When the door finally opened, my brother walked in like nothing had happened. Calm, steady, different. Time, Dad said. Noted, my brother replied. Not sorry, not rushed, just noted. That alone was enough. Explain. My brother shrugged slightly, lost track. That was it. No fear, no urgency, just honesty without submission. And that was something our father didn't know how to handle. 200, Dad said again. But this time, my brother didn't even move. No, immediate, clear, final. The tension in the room snapped. You don't get to choose, Dad said, stepping forward. And my brother answered, I just did. That was the moment everything truly changed. Not because of the words, but because of what they meant. Control wasn't breaking anymore. It was being taken back. And for the first time in our lives, We realized something powerful. He only had control, as long as we gave it to him. The shift didn't explode overnight. It spread slowly, like something quiet but unstoppable. After that night, my brother stopped pretending. Not loudly, not recklessly, but deliberately. He followed only what he chose to follow. Nothing more, nothing less. And that changed everything in the house. At first, our father tried to tighten control even more. Schedules were written down and placed on the wall. Wake up times, study hours, meal times, lights out, every minute accounted for. It looked less like a home now and more like a system on paper. But systems only work when people believe in them. And my brother didn't anymore. A few days later, it was my turn to feel that shift directly. I came home from school 5 minutes late. 5 minutes. In any normal house, that wouldn't even be noticed. In ours, it was already too much. Dad was waiting. He didn't ask where I was. He didn't ask why. He just said, "Late." I nodded, because that was the expected response. Acknowledgement. Nothing else. Consequence, he said, pointing to the floor. For a second, I almost moved automatically. Years of habit, years of conditioning. My body knew what to do before my mind caught up. But then I looked at my brother. He was sitting at the table, watching, not warning me, not signaling me, just watching. And in that moment, I realized something. He wasn't going to take the first step for me. I had to decide it myself. That was the real difference. Before, we obeyed without thinking. Now, we had a choice. I looked back at Dad, then at the floor, then back at him, and I said, "No." The word felt unfamiliar, heavy, like it didn't belong in my mouth. But once it came out, it stayed. Dad's eyes locked onto mine. "You don't get to refuse." His voice was still calm, still controlled, but there was something under it now. Something sharper. "I'm not late to disrespect you," I said carefully. "I'm late because I stayed after school." "Unapproved," he replied instantly. "That's not how life works," I said. That sentence changed everything, because it wasn't just refusal. It was contradiction. Silence filled the room again. But this silence felt different from before. It wasn't fear anymore. It was tension. Real tension. The kind that builds when two sides stop backing down. Dad took a step closer. "You don't understand life yet." Maybe he was right. Maybe we didn't. But we understood something else now. "This isn't discipline," I said. "This is control." I don't think anyone had ever said that to him before. Not directly. Not in his own house. His jaw tightened slightly. "That was rare." "Go to your room," he said. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was being sent there. I felt like I was choosing to leave. That night, something changed between me and my siblings. We didn't say much, but we sat together longer than usual. In the same room, without tension, without fear, and slowly, the distance that had always existed between us started to disappear. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were understanding each other. My sister had been the quietest for the longest time. She followed everything, perfectly, no mistakes, no resistance. But that didn't mean she wasn't affected. It meant she had learned to hide it better. A few weeks later, her moment came. It was small. At least, it should have been. She got a B on a test. Not failing, not even bad, just not perfect. Dad looked at the paper for a long time, then placed it on the table. "Explain." Her voice was soft. I tried. Wrong answer. In our house, effort didn't matter. Results did. "Trying is not a result," he said. She nodded. "I'll do better." He slid the paper back toward her. "You will correct it." "I can't," she said quietly. "It's already graded." Silence. Then you failed." That word hit harder than it should have. Failed. Over a B. I saw her hands tighten. Slightly. Just enough. Something inside her was reacting. "You didn't get an A," he continued. "That means you didn't meet the standard." And then she said it. Soft, but clear. "Maybe your standard is the problem." Everything stopped. Even my brother looked at her. Because that wasn't just resistance. That was truth. Dad's eyes narrowed slightly. "What did you say?" She looked up. For the first time, fully. No fear, no hesitation. "I said your standard is the problem." Her voice was still calm. But it wasn't weak anymore. "It's never enough," she continued. "No matter what we do. You don't see effort. You don't see improvement. You only see what's missing." The room felt completely still. "You call it discipline," she said. "But it doesn't feel like that. It feels like we're never allowed to be human." That sentence stayed in the air. Heavy, unavoidable. Dad didn't respond immediately. And that was new. Because for the first time, he didn't have a quick answer. Didn't have control of the moment. Didn't have a command ready. My sister placed the paper down. Neatly, calmly. "I'm not fixing something that isn't broken." Then she stood up and walked away. No permission, no waiting. Just walked. I watched Dad closely, waiting for the reaction, the correction, the punishment. But it didn't come. Not right away. Because something was happening that none of us had seen before. Not just resistance, not just disobedience, but unity, not planned, not discussed, but real. One by one, we had stopped accepting the system. And when that happens, the system stops working. Over the next few months, the house became quieter. But not in the old way. Before, the silence was forced. Now, it was distance. We still lived under the same roof. But we weren't part of the same structure anymore. Meals became optional. Conversations became minimal. Rules became suggestions. Dad still held on to them. But they didn't hold on to us. And I think he felt it. More than he showed. Because control doesn't disappear loudly. It fades. And when it fades, what's left behind is something unfamiliar. Something uncomfortable. Something he had never learned how to handle. A house full of people who were no longer under his command. What came next wasn't loud. No final fight. No dramatic explosion. Just distance. The kind that grows quietly until one day you realize it's too wide to cross. My brother was the first to leave. It didn't happen suddenly. It was something he had been preparing for long before we noticed. He stopped arguing, stopped resisting out loud, not because he had given up, but because he had already decided. One evening, he came home, sat at the table, and said, "I enlisted." Just like that. No build-up. No hesitation. Dad looked at him. "You're not ready." My brother didn't react. I didn't ask. That sentence carried something different. Not anger. Not rebellion. Just independence. Dad leaned back slightly. "The military isn't your escape." "I know," my brother said. "It's my choice." There was a pause. A long one. Then Dad asked, "Why?" That question, it felt out of place. Because he had taught us never to ask it. And now he was asking us. My brother held his gaze. "Because I want discipline without fear." Silence. That answer landed deeper than anything else we had said so far. Because it wasn't rejection. It was comparison. Dad didn't respond. He just nodded once. Short. Controlled. Then don't fail. That was it. No pride. No encouragement. Just expectation. But this time, it didn't hit the same. Because my brother didn't need anything from him anymore. The day he left, there was no emotional goodbye. No hugs. No speeches. Just a firm handshake. Like a transfer. Like one system handing off to another. But when the door closed behind him, the house felt different. Quieter. Not empty. Just missing something important. And for the first time, I think Dad felt it too. Because that morning, 5 a.m. came and went. And no one said anything. No inspection. No corrections. Just silence. My sister and I looked at each other. Confused. Because that had never happened before. The system had always been consistent. Now, it wasn't. And that inconsistency said more than any rule ever had. Weeks passed. Then months. My brother called sometimes. Short conversations. But different. Lighter. He didn't sound tense anymore. Didn't sound like he was holding something back. One time, he said something that stuck with me. "They're stricter here," he said. "But it's not the same." I asked him what he meant. He paused for a second. "Here, you know why you're doing something." That word again. Why. The word we were never allowed to use. "And when you mess up," he continued, "they correct you, but they don't make you feel small." That difference, it mattered more than anything. Because it proved something we had started to suspect. This wasn't about discipline. It never was. Back home, things kept changing. Not in obvious ways, but in the spaces between things. Dad stopped enforcing every small rule. Not completely, but enough to notice. Dinner wasn't always at the exact same time. He didn't correct posture as often. He didn't monitor every movement. At first, it felt like relief. But then, it started to feel strange. Because when control disappears, you start wondering what replaces it. My sister changed next. Not suddenly, but steadily. She started going out more. Studying at friends' houses. Spending time outside the system we grew up in. One evening, she sat across from Dad and said, "I got accepted." He looked up. "Where?" She named a college. "Far. Far enough that coming home wouldn't be easy." Dad was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "When do you leave?" She gave him the date. No emotion in her voice. No hesitation. Just information. He nodded. "Prepare." That was it. "No, I'm proud of you." "No, that's great. Just prepare." But this time, she didn't look disappointed. Because she wasn't expecting anything anymore. And that was the real shift. We had stopped expecting him to change. And because of that, we had started changing ourselves. The day she left felt even quieter than when my brother did. Maybe because I knew what it meant. The house wasn't just losing people. It was losing control, one by one, piece by piece. After she left, it was just me and him. For the first time, no buffer, no shared looks across the table, no silent support, just space. And that space felt heavier than anything before it. The routines still existed, but they were weaker now. Less enforced, less absolute. One night, we sat across from each other at dinner. No sound except the plates. Then suddenly, he said, "You're different." I looked up. "So are you." That wasn't defiance. It was observation. He didn't respond immediately. Then he asked, "Do you think I was wrong?" That question, I wasn't ready for it. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I had never imagined him asking it. I thought about everything. The mornings, the punishments, my sister in the cold, my brother on the floor. Years of silence, years of pressure. Then I said, "I think you thought you were right." He nodded slightly, and I think that mattered more to you than how we felt. That was the most honest thing I had ever said to him. He didn't argue, didn't correct me, didn't defend himself. He just sat there, quiet, and for the first time, he looked like someone who didn't have control over the conversation. Or maybe, over anything at all. A few months later, I left too. Different state, different life. No strict schedules, no inspections, no fear. At first, it felt unreal. Like something was missing. Then I realized, what was missing wasn't structure. It was pressure. And without it, you could finally hear your own thoughts. We didn't cut him off completely. But we didn't stay close either. Calls became occasional, short, careful, neutral. Years passed like that. Then one day, the message came. Simple, direct, just like always. "I am retiring next month. There will be a ceremony." Then, after a pause, "Attendance is expected." I stared at that line for a long time. Expected. Even now, even after everything, the language hadn't changed. My brother was the first to respond. He sent a message to both of us. "You seeing this?" My sister replied. "Of course it says expected." I typed. "Some things never change." There was a pause in the chat. Then my brother wrote, "What if we go?" I stared at the screen. Then my sister added, "And we follow his rules." That was it. That was the moment everything aligned. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of clarity. We weren't kids anymore. We weren't under his system. But we had lived in it long enough to understand it completely. And for the first time, we could choose how to use it. I typed one word, yes, and just like that, the plan wasn't spoken, but it was understood. Perfect posture, perfect timing, perfect obedience. One last time. The day of the ceremony arrived without warning. Not because we didn't know the date, but because none of us talked about it after that decision. There was no detailed plan, no rehearsal, no discussion about what exactly we would say. We didn't need one. We had lived inside his system long enough to understand it better than anyone else. The venue was large, a formal military hall filled with rows of chairs, polished floors, flags, and quiet conversations. People moved with purpose, uniforms pressed perfectly, shoes shining. Everything looked controlled, just like he liked it. We arrived separately, not by accident, but because that's how life had taken us. Different cities, different lives, different versions of ourselves. But when we saw each other near the entrance, something clicked instantly. No words, just a look. And in that look, everything was clear. We were here for the same reason. We walked in together, naturally falling into sync. Our steps matched without trying. Our posture straightened automatically. Years of conditioning didn't disappear. It just changed purpose. People noticed. You could feel it. 3 adults walking in perfect alignment, calm, silent, precise. It drew attention without asking for it. We didn't look at anyone. Didn't acknowledge the whispers. We just moved forward, toward the stage. He was already there, standing tall, decorated, respected. People were shaking his hand, smiling, thanking him for his service. To them, he was everything a disciplined man should be. A leader, a role model, a success. We stopped a few rows in front of the stage. Not sitting, not blending in, just standing, at attention, hands at our sides, eyes forward, still, completely still. At first, no one said anything. They assumed we were part of something official. Maybe a formal family tribute. Maybe a planned gesture. But then time passed, and we didn't move, didn't clap, didn't react, didn't behave like family. We behaved like soldiers waiting for instruction. And slowly, people started noticing something was off. Our father noticed too. At first, there was pride in his expression. A small shift in posture. Like he approved of what he was seeing. Like he recognized his work. But then, that pride faded, because something didn't feel right. We weren't responding to him. We weren't acknowledging him. We were just there, waiting, exactly how he trained us to be. The ceremony began. Speeches, introductions, stories about leadership and discipline. People talked about his consistency, his standards, his ability to shape people. We stood through all of it, unmoving, unreacting, and the longer it went on, the more uncomfortable the room became, because people started comparing what they were hearing and what they were seeing. When his name was called for his final recognition, the room filled with applause. Everyone stood, except us. We were already standing, but we didn't clap. We didn't smile. We didn't react. We just maintained position, eyes forward, waiting. That's when the attention shifted fully onto us. The whispers grew louder. Why aren't they clapping? Are those his kids? What's going on? He stepped up to the podium, accepted the recognition, turned to face the audience. And for a moment, his eyes locked onto us. That's when it hit him. Not fully, but enough. Because what he was seeing wasn't pride. It wasn't support. It was something else. Something familiar. Something he had created. When the speech ended, an officer stepped forward and said, "We'd now like to invite his family to join him on stage." A hand gesture followed. Polite, expected, normal. We didn't move. The officer paused, confused, then gestured again. Still nothing. The room went quiet. That kind of quiet where people stop pretending not to notice. Our father leaned slightly toward the microphone. "You can come up." His voice was controlled, but there was something under it now. Something uncertain. My brother spoke first. Loud, clear, emotionless. "We're awaiting a direct order, sir." The word "sir" echoed, and the room froze. Because suddenly, this didn't feel like a ceremony anymore. It felt like something else. Our father's expression changed. Slightly, barely visible, but real. "This isn't necessary," he said. My sister responded. Calm, steady. "Disobedience is failure. Your rule." A few people shifted in their seats. Others leaned forward, because now, they were understanding. Not everything, but enough. I stepped forward half a step. Still maintaining posture. Still controlled. "You taught us not to speak unless spoken to." My voice was even, measured. "You taught us not to question." A pause. "You taught us that feelings are weakness." The room was completely silent now. No movement, no distractions, just listening. "So we're here," I continued. "Following your system." My brother added. "Perfect timing." My sister said. "Perfect posture." Then I finished. "Perfect obedience." And then, nothing. We stopped speaking, because that was part of it too. Silence. Waiting. The same silence we had lived in for years. Our father looked at us. Really looked this time. Not as an audience. Not as a commander. But as a man trying to understand something he couldn't control. And for the first time in our lives, he didn't have an answer. Didn't have an order. Didn't have authority in that moment. Because authority only works when people accept it. And we weren't accepting it anymore. We were reflecting it. The room felt different now. Heavy, uncomfortable. People weren't clapping, weren't smiling. They were watching, trying to reconcile two versions of the same man. The one they respected, and the one standing in front of his children. My brother broke formation first. Slowly, deliberately, not as defiance, but as choice. My sister followed, then me, and just before we turned to leave, I spoke one last time. Not loudly, but clearly enough for the entire room to hear. "We learned discipline from you." A pause. "But we learned how to live by leaving you." No anger, no shouting, just truth. We turned, and walked out. Not in formation this time. Not in sync. Just, freely. And behind us, for the first time, he wasn't being followed. He was being seen.